You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it, there to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
What makes us Americans is our shared commitment to an ideal, that all of us are created equal.
I, too, am America.
Now here's your host, Bryce Robbins.
Hello, everybody, and I'm actually coming to you once again live from New Jersey, not DC. I decided to come down this week for my grandmother's birthday, which is going to be on Sunday. So I got a long train ride back home. That's all right, because today I have a special guest with me, actually a former teacher in my school, and also had a very cool history before that, probably one of the most unique ones I've ever heard. So he's here to tell his story. Dr. Keith Massey's with us. So, Dr. Massey, tell us, how are you? First question, obviously.
I'm well, Bryce. How are you?
I'm good. So I guess if you don't mind telling us, you worked for the NSA, and that's a really cool job. How did you start?
I did indeed, yeah. Yeah, so what happened, Bryce, I had finished my PhD in Biblical Hebrew with a minor in Arabic at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I had taught Latin 1 year in Wisconsin. And when 9/11 happened, the various news outlets were running, I remember seeing this, there was a ticker at the bottom of the screen saying, anyone with expertise in Arabic language, please consider sending your resume to the intelligence agencies. And in those days following 9/11, things were so raw, people were expecting a follow-on attack any day. And so the Thursday after 9/11, I sent my resume online to pretty much all the intelligence agencies. And I didn't expect necessarily to get a response. I felt I had a duty to at least put myself out there in case the country needed me. I got an email back from the NSA on Sunday following 9/11, and the process of my testing and my security clearance, it all kind of followed, and I was informed in February of 2002 that I had a top secret clearance because of my successful vetting and my security investigation. But it was interesting. They told me they could not bring in new employees until June because just the logistical complications of bringing in new people, where were they going to sit, the computers that needed to be hooked up. It all took months. And so in June, I walked in the doors of the top secret agency, the National Security Agency, and I went to work as an Arabic linguist.
Wow. Very cool. I mean, it's just very cool how you kind of just picked up your job right when 9/11 happened. I think that's very patriotic, I guess I would say. So in your time at the NSA, I mean, there's been a lot of scandals since 2013, since Edward Snowden.
Yeah, the other half. About
the NSA. Can you put some of that stuff to bed for us? I mean, or at least explain some of it, at least, Yes, I would be happy to share my perspective as an employee.
It was very clear from the very beginning. They drilled into us that we are tasked with developing intelligence, which was intercepted by electronic means, for national security purposes and also to inform our policymakers, but that intelligence was only foreign in nature. We were never to spy on Americans. To give you an idea of how strict this was, every single year we were required to read the Constitution. Now, how do they make sure we read it? Because you're sitting at your workspace, and no matter what you're doing, however crucial or sensitive it is, all of a sudden, up pops a window on your workstation, and it just simply says, you're going to read the Constitution. And you have to click through each of these screens, which include sentences of the Constitution, and if you click too fast, it tells you you need to spend more time. I read the Constitution every single year, and they stressed to us, we are never to spy on Americans. Now, what happened with Snowden in particular, he was a contractor primarily involved in electronic equipment. He was not part of the actual intelligence production cycle. In other words, unlike me, he was not translating materials, talking to reporters about how to construct a report to send to the president. And that's something I did on a regular basis. He was the guy who, if I had to have my password reset, I call him. And so what happened in the end, I don't think he completely understood some of the intelligence that he was able to steal and disseminate. Those of us involved in the intelligence production cycle know that, and again, as a former employee, I am required to never divulge any classified information that I was aware of for my life. And so I'll explain this in, it's somewhat vague terms, but clear enough, I think, that it makes the point. The process of collecting intelligence may sometimes involve inadvertently collecting information that was collected from Americans. However, analysts inside the NSA, just because something, say, from my cell phone accidentally gets collected, doesn't mean that analysts are even able to listen to it. Mm-hmm. Because there are strict measures in place. When I was doing my job, every search I made inside of a classified database was logged and sent to people whose job it was to confirm that what I was doing inside that database was legitimate and that it had nothing to do with American citizens.
All right.
So I'll just say this. As an American citizen, I don't worry 1 second about the possibility that the NSA is spying on me.
So, you always hear people say it's like 1987, Big Brother, they can see you through your cable box. And it's safe to say to those people that that is absolute nonsense?
It's absolute nonsense. First of all, the amount of data being created and even collected is so enormous that there's no possibility that people could effectively be looking at the data of all the Americans, let alone even all the bad guys. If you've ever had the experience, you've got an email account and you have some emails drop into your box and they're like junk or whatever, and you decide, even the time spent in deleting them isn't worth your time. And then you watch how all these unread messages keep piling up. Imagine that times 50. Imagine if you had to try to ride 50 email accounts. There's just no way. There's no way that the NSA could even possibly spy on Americans if they wanted to. There was an interesting quote. General Keith Alexander, who was one of the directors of the NSA while I was there, when he was asked about this issue, he made the point that given the fact that the NSA is so busy following bad guys, terrorists, and also collecting intelligence for policymakers, he said the big irony is we're the only ones not spying on Americans.
So it's actually pretty funny. And I guess to follow up with that then, I always hear politicians like Rand Paul and Ron Paul, before he retired, talking about how the NSA before the Patriot Act was dropped, but needed to revise the Patriot Act, and it became the Freedom Act, I think, a couple years back. Do you think that, the Patriot Act was overblown by the media, that it was a Big Brother type hunk of legislation, or do you think that it actually took steps needed to secure the country? And
the Patriot Act, the Patriot Act closed some areas where basically we were unable prior to that to appropriately process intelligence. Examples. One famous example is that, for instance, and this is actually covered by the so-called warrantless wiretapping program, codenamed Stellar Wind, which I was read into and which I participated in. Prior to some of those changes, there was no agency tasked, for instance, with being able to explore intelligence coming from outside the United States into the United States. And obviously that's something of great concern. I really believe strongly in the ability of our government to conduct proper oversight. And as a result, I don't think Americans really needed to ever worry that under the pretense of protecting us from terrorism, that the government was trying in any way to get into their business. We simply didn't have time.
It's really interesting hearing it from a first-hand source or primary source when you're used to hearing it from, the media telling you or, whoever telling you that, their big brother is coming to get you. And it's a very interesting story that I think doesn't get enough daylight from the primary sources. So you also spent time, I believe, right, in Afghanistan or Iraq?
No, I was in Iraq. Yeah.
Oh, Iraq. So yeah, if you could please tell us about that.
So I came on board in June of 2002, and by that fall, the president had spoken before the UN and had made the declaration that we needed to hold Saddam Hussein accountable to the promises he had made, that he would convincingly make the world know that he did not have any weapons of mass destruction existing or in production. And the NSA appropriately began a ramp up with the possibility that there might be military action. So I was sent actually that fall to study Iraqi dialect. I was sent to a facility in Georgia, which at the time was a classified NSA base. It was not public knowledge that it existed at Fort Gordon, Georgia. I studied Iraqi dialect there. At a later date, the NSA decided that they needed to declassify some of these other NSA bases in America. The only one that was openly known was Fort Meade in Maryland. And so now today it's common knowledge. There is an NSA base at Fort Gordon, Georgia. There's one in San Antonio, Texas, and there's one in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And so I studied Iraqi dialect there, and during the ground war phase, I was involved in an office connected with intelligence that was gathered against the Iraqi military to give our war forces the best information possible. And following the ground phase, I was working in another office, and as our occupation continued, we were needing people to actually deploy to the field. I was only able to go because I had successfully passed a number of tests that certified my Arabic ability as being of a level appropriate to have such deployment. There were 4 such tests. They were graphic, meaning translating something from a page, and also an auditory test, which is listening to a passage and transcribing it. The first test is unclassified, then it's from a classified source on each of the channels. So I successfully finished 3 of the 4, and I was offered the chance to go to Iraq. I'm going to admit, when it was offered to me, I just jumped at it. I said, absolutely, I'll go. There was a part of me that just really wanted, if possible, to participate and share my abilities, to help that effort. We had our men and women in uniform were in harm's way, and I was more than happy to go and risk my own life because it was still a war zone. Mm-hmm. So I'm not allowed to say exactly where I was because as a former NSA agent, I am not allowed to publish anything without giving the NSA a chance to have pre-publication review. And on one occasion, I published a spy novel, and inside my spy novel, I included a reference to where I was, and they told me it cannot be in the novel. It cannot be published. And so I was in Iraq. My deployment was 3 months long. It was in the summer and fall of 2004. So I guess what I can say is I was primarily involved in force protection, meaning that I was developing intelligence which might imply any threat to our forces. Mm-hmm. And it was, I'll admit, it was certainly, it will always be the greatest adventure of my life.
Very interesting story. I mean, it just fascinating, honestly. And I guess, so when you came back, did you continue with the NSA, or did you?
Yeah. As I said, I had been in an office connected to intelligence of the Iraqi military, and believe it or not, that when I published when I was ready to leave, I wanted an unclassified resume, and the NSA allows you to send them a resume, and if they approve it, it becomes an unclassified resume. And so there's all kinds of stuff that I was almost surprised I can say, that I was working in offices connected to, for instance, the Iraqi government, prior to the war. Mm-hmm. I worked then, after I got back from Iraq, I was sent immediately to the Office of Counterterrorism. And for those of us who joined the NSA after 9/11, that was really, where you wanted to be. Let's be honest. That was ultimately where the real fight was happening. Mm-hmm. And so I would work at the NSA for 2 more years. Now, I had made in December of 2003, I had made the acquaintance of the woman who would become my wife. And she was a Spanish teacher in New Jersey. We married after I got back from Iraq in December of 2004. Even so, I continued for 2 more years at the NSA, and I would drive up to New Jersey where she was living and teaching, most weekends. Mm-hmm. And so during that time period, for the rest of my time, I was in the Office of Counterterrorism.
So in your time at the Office of Counterterrorism, could you say that the NSA at least is active? Are they continuously fighting foreign and domestic terrorists? Like, is that a very...
That's a great question. First of all, we're not at all involved in domestic terrorism because the NSA has no charter to develop any intelligence associated with U.S. citizens. If the NSA were even to inadvertently discover information about a U.S. citizen involved in something nefarious, we would immediately just pass that to the FBI. That is the FBI's job. But regarding foreign attacks being planned against either the U.S. homeland or U.S. interests abroad, the NSA is the primary agency for that. Now, anyone driving by the Fort Meade facility will be able to conclude, based on the number of cars parked there, that the vast majority of NSA employees work a traditional 9 to 5 Monday through Friday shift. Mm-hmm. Driving by on the weekends, you would see that there's virtually no one there. Now the fact is there's plenty of people there, but you can't see from the highway that they're all parked on the other side of those large, beautiful blue buildings that you may be seeing like in the media, because the only door open to employees is one on the far side. The counterterrorism office in particular never shut down. And those of us who were working in that office, we were regularly having to take weekend shifts to staff that office. And so even though I was pretty much 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, at least once a month I was the person that had to be there, say, all day on Saturday, or I might have to pull a Sunday shift. From time to time, I'd have to pull even like late night or overnight shifts. So the counterterrorism office never shut down.
And what are some things that you did at the counterterrorism office that you guys, I guess, can share with us? Some, I guess, methods or some experience, perhaps, at the counterterrorism office that you could share with us that, I guess, was interesting to you or was memorable to you?
Well, in fact, there's one anecdote I can share, and I know I can share it because it was included in a book I published that the NSA did approve for publication. There was a Saturday that I was working at the NSA that something came across the desk that what it comes down to is, to use kind of an analogy, like if two people want to hide from somebody else that they're planning a party, they might come up with a code name so that they say, when we talk about going on a fishing trip, we're actually talking about planning the party, and say, hey, you're going to the fishing trip, right? Yeah. Have you found a nice spot for that fishing trip? Yeah. And so the person we're planning the party for doesn't know that those code names are actually something else. Well, terrorists use such systems and code names, and some of them are well known, with the result that when I saw a certain communication talking about an upcoming event using what was a well-known possible code name for an attack, I felt I needed to make a report on it and release it. Because I was there on Saturday, and it was, it was a smaller staff, it was all up to me, and I made the decision, and I put it out. I got back on Monday, and my boss comes to my desk, and she says, about that report you sent out on Saturday. I said, yeah. She says, you're going to have to brief the director of the NSA himself, General Keith Alexander, about your rationale, because there are a bunch of other agencies that feel that report was inappropriate and should never have been released. So I was thinking, wow, I'm in trouble. I'm in some trouble here. So I go up to a floor of the building that, of course, I had never visited before, and I was told to go into this room. I'm sitting in there, and there's all kinds of people sitting in there wearing better suits than I could afford. These are high-level management people, and in walks General Keith Alexander. Everybody stands, and then he says, at ease, and he sits down. And I'm sitting there in this meeting, and it goes on, and I'm hearing stuff that I don't even understand. It's management speak and all that. Finally, at the end of the meeting, he turns and he says, okay. He says, you were involved in that report? And I said, yeah. He says, I just need you to tell me why you thought that report should go out. And what it came down to is I told him I put the appropriate caveats on that report. I said, while this is a known cover term, it is entirely possible that this report is not nefarious, that it is talking about exactly what it seems to be talking about. But in the interest of making sure that people are informed, I put the report out. And he nods and he says, I will push back at the agencies that complain, and I will say the NSA stands by the report in order to make sure that that we always err on the side of caution. We stand by this report. So again, I was relieved, because I thought I was in trouble. And later that day, a gentleman comes up to my workstation and he gives me this coin, and it's a special coin. It has the seal of the NSA on it, and it says presented by the director, and it says this is a thank you for your briefing to the director this morning. Now these coins, in the military tradition, if you're given a coin by an officer, you basically have it on your person, because if you're ever in a social setting and people are going to have a round of drinks, everybody takes out their highest ranking coin, and the person whose coin is the lowest ranking has to buy the drinks. So the fact that I have a coin from the director, and he's a 4-star general, if I were ever in such a setting, I'm never having to buy a drink.
That's amazing. So, wow, that's very cool. So when you were in the meeting with, what was his name? General Keith Alexander, correct?
General Keith Alexander, yeah.
So what was going through your head before he started speaking that he was going to be behind you? What did you think that the consequences might be if he had a different point of view? It didn't occur to me that that it would be as serious as being fired. I was just concerned about the possibility, for instance, because I was in the counterterrorism office. If someone concluded higher up that I had erroneously released a report,
it could certainly involve me being sent to an office of less importance. So, I was certainly worried about that. But again, I did what in my conscience I felt I had to do, and he stood by that.
Wow. And have you ever had any other encounters with the general, or was that the only time?
That was the only time I met General Keith Alexander, he was the second director while I was there. Now, the first director when I was there was General Mike Hayden. And I actually met him on 2 occasions, which was unusual, that people might be surprised to learn that inside the NSA, there is a barber shop. There's this little area, and the people who work there, they're not top secret cleared, but they're allowed into this one area where there's a store, there's a barber shop. And so I sat down one day to get a haircut, and I had taken off my glasses because I was getting a haircut, and I'm pretty blind without my glasses. And so when my haircut was done, the barber gives me my glasses back. I look and I say, "Oh, this looks good." I turn to my left, and there, sitting in the chair next to me, is General Mike Hayden. And I was taken aback, and I said, "Good morning, General." And he says, "Good morning." So then, strange as it sounds, several weeks later, I go back for another haircut, and the exact same thing happens again. And there's General Hayden. If I was on my feet, I would have said, "General, we have to stop meeting like this." But no, I just again in a fluster, I again said, "Good morning, General. Good morning, General." Yeah, so I met Keith Alexander quite formally. He I actually spoke to, and on 2 occasions, General Mike Hayden only at a barbershop.
Wow. So, wow, that's really funny, actually. You just walked right into him. So, what else, I guess, can you tell us about the NSA? Are they effective at what they do? Because you said that they're trustworthy. I mean, that we should stop fearing the big brother, I guess. But can you say that they're effective, or they're efficient, or they work well?
Yes. The NSA, as I've said, is tasked by the United States government to develop communication intelligence from intercepted signals. And among the various nations of the world that are, all of them are trying it on some level, we're certainly as good as everybody else. The fact is there are other countries as good as us. Israel and Russia definitely have capabilities probably equal to what we can do. And what that means is the NSA certainly makes a difference. Nevertheless, it's certainly true that despite everyone's best efforts, there have been times in which the NSA has been able to get information that resulted in stopping an attack. There are other times in which, despite everyone's best efforts, we might know an attack is imminent, but we're unable to get any further than the fact that it's about to happen. We certainly never got then any information about exactly when and where, such that it could be stopped. On a certain level, knowing something's going to happen at least allows you to, for instance, ramp up the number of police that might be deployed in various places. But in many ways, it is a frustrating job to be trying to stop attacks, knowing that for as good as you are, you can stop many. You can't stop them all. And certainly our news has shown, that things get through.
And I guess if you could ballpark for us almost, how many attacks can we say are stopped or, hindered by the NSA, I guess, in a year, maybe? I don't know if you would know that, or, I'm just curious.
Yeah, the answer is I don't know. If I did know, I probably couldn't divulge that, because that would actually, someone could extrapolate from that even like our exact levels of ability. The fact is classified information becomes declassified at regular levels, and And the information will eventually come out over the next 20 years, kind of, what the NSA was able to do in these years after 9/11. Again, what I can say is the NSA certainly makes a difference. The NSA certainly does an effective job of making the job of people who are trying to plan attacks much more difficult. They know that they can't openly talk about planning in certain electronic media. They know that. As a result, we make their job harder. And even that alone is something worth the price.
And now, I always hear the argument about the NSA, and of course it's from people who are obviously not as capable to talk about it than you are, but that it infringes on people's constitutional rights, especially the Fourth Amendment of unreasonable search and seizure. But would you say that it is well within reason of national security that the NSA does what it does, or should continue to grow, or continue to do what it does?
Well, again, this interestingly comes to the point of our Constitution enshrines those rights for our citizens. We don't enshrine those rights for others. Meaning, for instance, if our policymakers want us to be able to infringe on the right to the right to not be surveilled, we don't care about citizens other than our own. Other peoples are trying to spy on us as well. I can tell you that I know the NSA bends over backwards to not spy on Americans. But in terms of our own citizens, that we certainly have nothing to fear from the NSA. But yeah, we spy on others. That's our job.
So even like the collecting of phone records, like you said, I mean, they can't search through them all. But does that even get a little gray when it comes to? Yeah,
that was the big thing that was the fallout from the Snowden leaks, that the NSA was collecting on a bulk level the metadata of phone records. And
so what does that really mean? I don't know.
Yeah, so what metadata is, when you get your cell phone bill, mm-hmm. and your cell phone bill includes an exhaustive list of all the calls you made, all the numbers you called, all the texts you sent, okay? Mm-hmm. That's your metadata. And if you stop and think about it, the very fact that that comes on your bill means there's all kinds of people that have access to it.
Right.
All the people that work at your cell phone provider theoretically can see some of that stuff. Whether or not you even really have an expectation of privacy over that metadata, I think is somewhat suspect. The NSA willingly surrendered the collecting and holding of that stuff on the provision that the cell phone companies themselves promised to keep it in case anyone ever needed to search it. So for instance, after the San Bernardino attacks, people were obviously interested in knowing if that person was a foreign agent, and being able to search that person's phone records after the fact would be crucial. So, in the end, people might be upset thinking, oh my God, who has my metadata? But then when something happens, people want someone to be able to look at that person's metadata overnight in order to see if that person is, possibly involved in follow-on attacks. So, a record of who I called, numbers I called, that's my metadata. And I'm personally not worried about the fact that the people at my cell phone provider have that on a computer. It's again, there's millions of us, and no one's probably able to do anything with it.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, there's out of all the millions of people, say, who have my same cell phone provider, I'm not at all worried that someone at my cell phone company can look up my list of calls. But the fact is, they can. They really could. That data is in there, and that means if the NSA also was controlling such data, and if NSA employees had to be submitted to a regular review of their searches in such databases, I'm more comfortable with the NSA having that data than I am my cell phone company.
I actually think it was just an advertisement maybe like a year ago for, I think it was like AT&T or T-Mobile, saying that they don't collect your metadata or whatever it is. So I just think that was interesting. I remember hearing that, seeing that online. And
well, if they actually were to say they don't collect your metadata, they're lying.
Oh, really? It's a little muffled. I can't hear you. There you go.
Oh, I'm saying, if any phone company were to claim that it's not collecting your metadata, they are lying to you, because the FBI has the right to subpoena the phone records of somebody, and that company is required by law to hand them over. So they've got those records.
And now, when they are collecting your data, I mean, isn't, in a sense, a person getting a phone, signing up with a phone company, aren't they not willingly giving up that right to have that sense of privacy? And, I mean, this is not something that the Founding Fathers had to deal with. So, I guess in a sense, I don't understand how people can make the argument that the NSA is infringing on my rights by even collecting phone calls in the first place.
Oh, you make a very good point, Bryce. What it comes down to is, where do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy? So, for instance, in the year 1850, a person sitting at home with their spouse having a conversation, they have a reasonable expectation that the conversation in their house is private. They really do. If those two go to a restaurant and they're sitting at a table and there's a table right next to them, you don't have a reasonable expectation that the person next to you can be listening in on your conversation. So the question is, when phones were invented, was there at that time a reasonable expectation that no one had the ability to listen in? Absolutely not. In fact, the operator in a typical town was the one literally putting a cable into a slot, allowing that call to happen, and that person could listen in on your call. I remember visiting my grandmother when I was young. She had a party line. You know, she picked up the phone, and 4 people in a row on her highway all had the same line. I remember her picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, Mabel, I need to make a phone call. When are you going to be done?" And Mabel says, "Oh, I'll be done in a few minutes." So she could pick up the phone and listen in on Mabel's conversation. And so Mabel had no expectation of privacy. So we've kind of given phones the concept that you shouldn't have any worry that someone's listening in, but strictly speaking, you probably shouldn't assume a phone is so secure. For instance, right now I guess they're not as popular, but some years back, people would have cordless phones in their homes, which was really just a radio to like the console. And people could easily manipulate various equipment to listen in on other people's cordless phones. And so, so you're right. You're right. Phone technology itself, just by definition, no one should assume that that's so private.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point, and no, definitely. So I don't want to keep it too long. I'm sure you have other stuff to do, so I'll just ask you to tell us one more interesting, I guess, story or event that you can share with us, and if you want, where people could find you. I know you have a YouTube channel where you post videos that are actually very, very funny, some of them, I must say, the ones that I've seen at least. So yeah, please share if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, well, if anyone wants to, for instance, one of my life's missions is I really like learning languages. I've created materials to try to help people. I've got a lot of free resources, including some of the videos I've made, Latin covers of various popular songs. All of that stuff, if you visit www.keithmassey.com, I've got all that stuff available there. And in terms of again, there were there were so many things I experienced. But one interesting thing I experienced when I was in Iraq, I had arrived in June of 2004, and I was at this base. And one day, and there had not been any attacks. There had not been any attacks on our base. And one day I had left the little building where I was working. I was on my way to the restroom, and I heard someone slam a door. And they slammed it so hard that it was like this loud noise. And I was angry. I was thinking, why would someone slam a door that loud? So I kept walking, and then I heard it again. Someone like slammed this door extremely inappropriately loud. And I kept walking, and then I looked up and I saw this thing spinning through the air. It was a mortar. And I saw it land on the other side of our cement wall. And then I saw like the dirt like throw up in the air, and then I heard the sound of the explosion. The fact was, those first two noises were mortars that were landing. My body basically was making sense of these irrationally loud noises, and it was turning it into the sound of a door slamming. And despite all my training that I was supposed to run for cover when we were under attack, I just stood there, and then I watched another one tumbling through the air. I just stood there watching it, and then it exploded. And then when the attack was all over, only then I said, I need to get to cover. And I ran to a little bunker. And I was thinking after the fact, it's like, wow, I really am in danger here. But, that was kind of, in many ways, that was my first moment of terror in that experience. But,
wow. Indiana Jones almost.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just thinking
so in the end, I made the decision, after 2 more years after Iraq, I made the decision that I had served my country. I certainly had the feeling, that I'm not going to save the world. I wanted a calmer life. My wife was a school teacher in New Jersey, and I resigned my position. I got a job as a Latin teacher at Leonia High School, and in the end, while I'm certainly very proud of what I did, I actually believe in the end I've done more good for the world in teaching Latin at Leonia High School for the last 10 years. Because I know the lives I've touched there, the young people who are, they're in need of instruction, and I love my topic, and I believe that even a little Latin is very valuable. I'm very happy with where I've landed. And so in the end, again, I was happy to do what I did. I'm also very, very proud of the work I've done since then.
Wow. Well, Dr. Massey, thank you so much for your service, not only to our country, but also as a teacher. I think that's definitely a very important role that you play. But that is an awesome story you've had to tell us, and I hope to definitely have you back on in the future to talk more about it. I could talk for hours about this. I think it's amazing. So once again, thank you so much for coming on.
I've had a great time, Bryce. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
have a good
one. You too.
All right, so you just heard that's Dr. Keith Massey, an old teacher of mine when I went to high school. I'm just kidding, a couple weeks ago. And he was also a former employee at the NSA, sounded like he was high up, lived a clear life of adventure, and I think that's just amazing. What a great story to tell. Like I said, when he was leaving, it sounded almost like he was Indiana Jones, so to speak. Teacher by day, adventure by night. And I that's just very, that's just fascinating. All right, we're going to go to break real quick, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the coming weeks, shows we got planned, stuff I got to do. But for now, I'm Bryce Robbins. This is Opinion Nation. We'll be right back.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it, there to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Again, I'm Bryce Robbins. This is Opinion Nation, and you just heard an awesome interview with a former teacher and former NSA employee, Dr. Keith Massey. And I was thinking about it over the break, how cool it is in the end, and I encourage everyone to go listen. How he said he's felt as though he's changed more people's lives. He's helped more people being a public school teacher than at the NSA. And I just think that we need so many more teachers in this country, in the world, to have that mentality that they are changing the world of people who will then, in effect, go on to change other people's lives. And I just think that is really amazing and inspirational and speaks to who he is as a person. So that was really an awesome thing that he said there. And I encourage everyone, if you're just tuning in now, if you're just checking it out now, to go rewind, go check it out, go click it again. listen to the interview with Dr. Massey, because honestly, I had more fun just listening to some of his stories and the things he had to say than I did with Jill Stein. Partially because I spent most of the 10 minutes with Dr. Stein feeling like she was going to send the FBI after me or whatever. Well, actually, she can't. She probably sent a bunch of trees after me. But I just thought that was really a really fun interview. So if you're definitely looking to listen to something cool, got an hour to spare, check out this interview. Also, so now that I am in college at George Washington University, and I have a lot of, I guess, free time, because college, I must say, is rather interesting. It seems as though it's all about time management. It's not that you don't have enough time, it's that you don't manage your time properly always. But I'm trying to do pretty good on that, and I am. And I actually found out that I'm a credit away from being a sophomore, and I just started last week. But besides that, I'm being exposed to a lot more people. I actually just had the opportunity to go to a panel, sit in and listen with Chuck Todd and a bunch of other people. I was listening in the audience to their panel about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and I thought it was a very interesting dynamic that Chuck Todd was leading this panel about. So I realized that I'm at the forefront of all the political world in GW, and I'll definitely be making sure to get some guests from that connection, just being there. In fact, a funny story. So I'm in this, I came home yesterday, I took the bus, and I'm going to take the train back down. But on my way to the bus, I figured, you know what, let me take a Lyft. It's the same thing as Uber, but I took Lyft Line, which means they pick up somebody, then they pick up you. And in that, I already made a connection to someone who works with a senator. My Lyft driver seat says, go, give each other your contacts. So awkwardly, I asked, I said, okay, what's your name and number? And the guy said, here, just text me. So I did. And I just thought that was a funny story. And then the Lyft driver looks at us and goes, see, making connections. But definitely a lot of guests will be coming out of the fact that I'm in DC. And we'll get to have a lot of cool conversations about that. But for now, I want to say once again, thank you for Dr. Massey to taking time out of his schedule to come join us on today's show. I've definitely been shooting for this one for a while. It's been an idea of mine. I'm glad he was so easily available to come on, I guess. He was very friendly about it, so that was awesome. So once again, a big thank you to you for coming on my show, Dr. Massey, and tune in next week, everyone. You can find us here on Spreaker, on iHeartRadio, on Stitcher, whole bunch of sources. You can find us. Visit our website, KLRN Radio. Don't feel free to donate if you want to help the station grow. But until then, I'm Bryce Robbins. This is Opinion Nation, and I'll catch you again next week, everybody. Have a good one.